This is Kate Swoboda, creator of YourCourageousLife.com, director of the Courageous Living Coach certification at TeamCLCC.com, and author of the book, The Courage Habit, which is available at booksellers and at Amazon. The Your Courageous Life podcast is all about going after what you want and creating and living a more courageous, emotionally resilient life. Might drop a couple of F-bombs, so maybe don't listen with your kids in the backseat of the car. And here we go with today's episode. Hi, everybody. Today's episode is all about a topic that I think it's like I almost, as I'm trying to think about how to describe the dynamic, the energy of what I'm going to talk about today, I might have a couple of false starts. I might, unravel a little bit and then explain it better halfway through the episode than I'm able to during the first half. But it is definitely something I notice. Today's episode, I'm titling it, Staying with the Process. And I think this is a little bit different than finishing what you start, in the sense that when I think of finishing what you start, I think of like if you start a class, finishing the class, like the class is the completion point. But when I think of staying with the process, what I'm thinking of is how you navigate the ups and the downs, the hills and the valleys, and really continue to be engaged and give it your all rather than dropping it for the next thing. And I wanted to speak to this because I know that is a pattern that I have absolutely had in my own life. And it is one of those things where it was only when somebody pointed it out to me in a really direct way, and frankly, only really in hindsight, that I could see how I was not staying with the process. And it's definitely something that I know comes up for other people. And you definitely know it's coming up in your own life if you are looking around and it's like, you try that and it's kind of, no, that doesn't work. You try that and it's like, no, that doesn't work. You can try that other thing. It's like, no, that doesn't work. People do this with relationships. They do it with careers. They do it with personal growth work. They do it in all kinds of different arenas. And the problem that's at hand is that when people are not staying with the process and really going all the way through, they never get the benefit of what's on the other side. And then, unfortunately, the critic loves to chime in with like, look at all those things, like you don't stick to this, or sometimes the critic doesn't make it about what you stick to. Sometimes the critic makes it like, you're just never going to be happy. You've tried all these things and like nothing ever works for you. There's something wrong with like you on a fundamental level because you haven't found the thing. So let's start with this critic voice, right? Okay. So if you have not found the thing, the career, the relationship, the personal growth work that really fulfills you, I have a hunch that might be tied to a couple of things. One being a story that is actually not true, that one thing is supposed to fulfill you in all ways. And another being that maybe you haven't learned the skill yet of staying with your process around the things that don't work for you, enough to actually see them work for you. All right, so I'm going to say that one more time. And I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not sitting back like judging you. Like I've walked through this and come to the other side of it and found that it was pretty profound to stick with my process. So again, two things in particular, there might be more that I'll unpack as we go on, but two things in particular that are important around staying with the process is, one, letting go of the false belief that there is like a one thing, a one career, a one relationship, a one personal growth practice that is going to fulfill you in every single way. And two, actually looking at the things that don't quite fulfill you in a certain way, and instead of jumping to a new thing to have a process with, staying with the process that you're in and really learning how to make staying with the process you're in the actual work. Sounds kind of weird, right? But it's like, okay, I'll illustrate this a little bit by like just giving, kind of an example that feels a little more relatable. And then I'll talk a little bit about my own process in the hopes that that example might be helpful. So like if somebody wants to run a marathon, okay, and they've heard all these stories about how running a marathon will change your life. You'll be so proud of yourself. You'll be stronger than you've ever been. It's going to be amazing. And they're like, yeah, that's it. I'm inspired, or I saw a documentary, or my friend ran a marathon. I want what she's having. I'm going to run a marathon too. So you start running the marathon, and then you realize it's actually hard to train for a marathon. So suddenly this false belief that training for a marathon was going to give you what you saw in your friend or in that documentary or whatever inspired you to start, suddenly realizing like, oh my God, it's not going to give me all of those things, certainly not right away. Or the other thing that can happen for people training for a marathon is just kind of going, oh, well, like I started training for this marathon. It was really hard. I just really wasn't having as much fun as I thought I would. So it just, it wasn't for me. So I just stopped. And in particular, what really interests me is this, it wasn't for me phrase. It wasn't for me. When someone has not actually stayed with their process. Now, absolutely, if let's I'll think of Oprah. Oprah, and some of you might not know this, some of you babies, some of you people who are just so much younger than me, laugh with me, okay? Oprah ran a marathon once upon a time, and she ran the marathon. She trained for it. She did it. She ran the marathon, and she's been very open ever since. I am never doing that again. It was not for her, okay? But she stayed with the process. She talked a lot about the process of training when she was actually going through it. No surprise there. She's Oprah. That's what she does. We love her for it. But there is something about someone going, I tried a plant-based diet and it just wasn't for me. And it's like they tried it for 2 weeks. To be honest, most nutritional changes to really see the benefit, going to take a good 3-4 weeks at least, if not 6. And that's tied to your microbiome and microbiome changes that need to happen. Exercise, same thing, just wasn't for me. Maybe you have referred a friend before to a personal growth workshop or counselor or a book. And how'd it go? Did you try it out? And they go to day 1 of the workshop and then don't come for any other days. And they're like, yeah, I went that first day. It just wasn't for me. Or they read a chapter of the book. Yeah, I started to read it and it wasn't for me. And you are sitting there having done the full breadth of whatever it was that you were evangelizing for. And that the person didn't actually have a full process with it. So maybe you can see, because you're on the other side of it, how can that person know it wasn't for them if they didn't actually see it through? So today's topic, staying with the process. I told you that I'd share my own story with this particular experience. And for me, it basically was, okay, so prior to engaging in a lot of my own self-help work, the predominant emotions that I felt, and I say predominant, and I mean it was intense. I felt a mix of either extremely agitated and angry, and I felt a ton of shame, by the way, about feeling agitated and angry. I felt like I was a bad person. I felt like I must be this awful person who's just so angry all the time. Why can't I get it together? Why can't I be happy? Da 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 da. And when I wasn't feeling agitated and angry, I would feel really sad, kind of hopeless, kind of despairing. And I felt pushed and pulled between a lot of these two places. So in many ways, I feel like my story of personal growth, and I don't think this is too dramatic a point to put on it, was a matter of life and death. And I say that just as somebody who had contemplated suicide on several occasions, had really just gone into a place of suicidal ideation, like maybe the world is a better place without me. It'd be so nice if I could just go to sleep and not wake up. I mean, I really felt like I had been sitting with feelings of sadness or anxiety or fear or anger for so long. And I had tried things. That had been the hard thing. I had tried going to therapy. I had tried antidepressants. I had tried books. I had tried workshops. I had tried coaches. I had tried da-da-da-da-da. So if you had asked me, did you try this, this? I would have said, yes, I tried those things. They didn't work. Well, okay, now let's tell the truth. The truth. You know, not just the truth, but the truth. I tried those things for maybe a couple of months. Maybe. And I showed up for therapy sessions and then didn't take the work into my life. I showed up for coaching sessions and then didn't take the work into my life. I read the books and then didn't take the work into my life. And it was very unconscious, but my belief system was that something external to me was going to fix me. So because of that belief system, I was thinking that all I needed to do was show up for the therapy sessions. I was not understanding that for therapy or coaching or the workshop or the book or whatever it was that I was trying, it was going to be more than just, did I actually show up at the appointed hour? I was going to need to do some daily work to look at what my patterns were and like really get clear, like literally, this is it right here. This is the moment when I get hooked every single time and I'm spun out in anxiety or I'm spun out in depression or I'm spun out in my anger or I'm, whatever the thing was. This is it right here. And the other thing that would happen is that I would go to therapy, coaching, or read a book, or go to a workshop, or see something inspirational on TV, maybe Oprah, and I would feel just better enough that my suffering was alleviated a little bit, that I'd then get distracted, go start doing other things in my life, like just kind of going about life, feeling a little better, da-da-da. But because I was not actually doing anything about the core patterns that were at hand, the process that I was in, they just came back up again. It was like therapy or coaching or whatever work I was doing was just like a drug that I'd go take for an hour and it would have a little after effect for a day. And then I was right back where I started. And that process kept repeating itself over and over and over and over and over until I met a coach who actually said, here's the work you need to be doing in between sessions. And, this I've talked about my coach multiple times, Matthew Marzell, brilliant man, admire him beyond words. And so here I am, and I'm starting coaching with this guy, and he had no judgment. He was not like, you're bad, I'm not going to coach you unless you do these things between sessions. But he was just very straightforward. I'd come into my sessions, the same pattern would start to play out where, woe is me, this thing sucks, I'm pissed at this person, here's the thing that's going on that I don't like. And he'd ask me, so are you using your tools? How'd it go in that situation when you used your tools? He always called the work between sessions your tools. I think it's a great metaphor. And then I'd kind of be sitting there squirming a little bit like, oh, well, I didn't use my tools. So it's like if I'm agitated with this person and he's giving me some tools to undertake between our sessions, and then I'm not actually using them to deal with my agitation with that person, guess what? I'm going to keep getting the same thing over and over and over. Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So here's how long my ass paid someone money to go into sessions, to complain about things, to have someone ask me, have you been using your tools? And me not use tools. 2 years. 2 years. I go in and I, to testament to where I was at and the power of his work, I stuck with it. But 2 years, I go into this guy and I'm going in every other week to a session, and it's kind of the same thing over and over and over. Why didn't you use your tools? What tools do you want to use? What tools could you have used? How to go when you use your tools? What do you want to create that's different? And sometimes I would even, and this is where you really know resistance is in play. I remember a couple sessions where I actually said something to him to the effect of, I don't want to use freaking tools. I want my life to be different. And he's looking at me like, yeah, I get that. I really see how hard this is. If you want your life to be different, what would you like to do? If you don't want to do the tools, what would work for you? Like, he had no attachment. It was not like this coach-led thing where I had to do it his way or I was a failure. He was just pretty straightforward with me. Like, here's the thing. You say you want your life to be different. If you're coming to me, here are the things that you can be doing on a regular basis that can really help. And this is what I know. So this is what I teach. This is what I share. This is what I coach people around. And if you don't want to use these tools, it's okay. I'll still try to help however I can. What tools would you like to use? And I remember moments like that where it was just like, Kate, like some inner wisdom was just going, girl, what are you doing? Like, yeah. So there was a way in which I was trying to outrun the very tools I was being offered. And I'll tell you about the tool I resisted the longest. Here it is, boom. And people think I'm crazy about this tool too. I thought Matthew was a little crazy when he'd talk about this tool. It's a tool I call process work. And I know that process work has a lot of different connotations in self-help and stuff like that. But in essence, there's this metaphor that I use that I borrow from the Challenge Day organization. And I talk a little bit about this in another podcast episode on how to regulate emotion. But imagine, if you would, that when there is a balloon, like a balloon, that is filled with air, what happens if that balloon gets too full of air? It will either leak or it will explode. This is not a trick question. So metaphorically, all of us are walking around with these emotional balloons, and they are very full from life's experiences, past experiences that we've had, maybe as children that have never been discharged. All the adults who told you, stop crying, the teachers who were harmful to you, past traumas, micro traumas, systemic oppression, reading the news headlines, your partner who is struggling with addiction or who doesn't know how to show up for you, the demands of life, grocery shopping, laundry, bills, all the things. So all that stuff, if you are not processing it out, results in a very full balloon. And when my emotional balloon was too full of air, it would leak out in little ways: resentment, snippy, sarcasm, feeling kind of weepy, feeling meh, feeling a little like, nothing, like, just feel like nothing ever works out for me, stuff like that. When my balloon was absolutely too full, it would explode. And that would be me showing up in my life either as just like enraged or totally despondent, like laying in bed, weeping, crying, absolutely down and out. Now, interestingly, in hindsight, I view those responses as this, like, paradoxically kind of strangely healthy response, if that makes sense. If we look with the metaphor of the emotional balloon, okay? So in terms of the ultimate survival of the organism, good thing that balloon would burst and I would bawl and get some of those feelings out, or I would be furious and angry and get some of those feelings out. Bad consequence of the balloon bursting, all the time and life that you lose when you're spending days in bed, all the friendships, relationships, strangers you leave with a bad taste in their mouth because you've been ragey and pissy and irritable and giving people a piece of your mind left and right. I mean, I got to tell you, I've, in case you're wondering, have also, in my many, many years of personal growth work, done a ton of atoning, making amends, seeking people out and offering apologies, sending up prayers, because there were times where the impact of my behavior on other people was, to put it mildly, not cool. So it was what it was, though. I was who I was, and I was wounded. I was hurting. I was all the things. And I'm not saying that excuses the impact that those behaviors had. I'm just being really real about who I was at that time and why it was how it was. So when I start showing up with Matthew, my coach, and I'm having all these feelings all over the place, and he's going, "Did you use your tools?" One of the tools he's talking about is process work. Process work is similar to when people sit down to meditate and just watch the breath. You set a timer, you sit down on your cushion, you watch your breath for 15 minutes, or you do a guided meditation, whatever your meditation path is. Process work is basically sitting down for 10 minutes and screaming into a pillow or punching a pillow if anger is the predominant thing you need to process out. Crying if sadness is the predominant thing that you need to process out. Whatever it is you need to process out, actually creating the time and the space to discharge that emotional balloon. Because when you discharge it yourself proactively, it doesn't leak and it doesn't explode. So Matthew has taught me this as a tool, and the picture was even starting to firm up. Like I was starting to see oh, that's why the book or the workshop or the therapy or the coaching would make me feel better for a little while. I'd have all these feelings, aka big emotional balloon. I'd go in for a session. I would cry or I'd complain or I'd talk about my anxiety, and I would get support around it. And I'd have this place where it was safe for me to blah, 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 get all that stuff out. And then I'd leave. And then the world would do what the world does, which is that we are not all walking around bubble wrapped. You are not going to walk around in a world that is full of trigger warnings. You are not going to walk around in a world where everybody's going, "You know what? I'm just going to take it easy on her today." That is not the world we live in. We live in a world where shit happens. We live in a world where there are oppressive systems. We live in a world where there are problems that are nuanced and complicated, and we don't know how to figure all of them out. So Matthew's point was always, this is a tool you can use so that the emotions don't build up and become too much. And what did I do for 2 years? Go in there and have all these theories about why I didn't really need to do it. Well, that's not really a tool that works for me. Well, I don't know it's just not my thing. That was something I would used to say. Well, here's the thing. Staying with a process. I'm glad that I didn't quit going. And I am more glad than anything that I finally decided, okay, you know what? This guy that I'm paying this money to, who I enormously admire and respect, who, even though I must be the most frustrating imaginable client, keeps showing up with nothing but love and compassion, who I observe has a pretty good head on his shoulders, who is pretty transparent about the fact that he has flaws and stuff. Because, there were totally times where I would, it's amazing that he didn't fire me as a client. I, turn the tables on him. Well, what's so good about your life? Are you sitting here telling me that you don't have problems? And if I just use some tools, I won't have problems either? He would totally not take the bait when I would do that. Seriously, can you believe I talked to somebody like that? I can't. But he wouldn't take the bait. He'd just go showing up with love, with care, with compassion. Absolutely. I have days where I don't like how I handled something. And you know what I do? I discharge it out. I'll process it out. Absolutely. I have lost my temper before in ways I'm not proud of. Or absolutely. Sometimes I look at the news headlines and I just feel utter sadness. And so what I do with that feeling is I go and I process it out. And I'm looking at this guy like, who are you? What? Who are you? Are you even human? That was kind of how I looked at it for a while. But I had to admit I was intrigued. So I decided that I was going to stay with the process. I was going to go all in, put all my chips on the table, and start doing process work. And I would be consistent about it for quite a while, and I would get all the benefits. And You guessed it if you're wondering. For a couple months, things would feel better, and then boom, oh, look at that. I drop off the practices, and then life slides back to what it was before, a little bit. So in essence, what I had to start doing was looking at all the places where I wanted to wiggle out and explicitly look at why. So now let's turn the tables so that you can think about a couple places in your life where this might come up. You're in one job. You're there for a couple months. You start to get that gritty, oh, I felt this feeling before. This isn't quite right. Oh, God, why did I say yes to this job? I don't want to stay with this. I got to get out of here. That becomes the predominant thought in your head. And maybe you've done this a couple times before, moved on from a few jobs. So why? Why the impulse to run? Why the need to bolt? Why the solution is I got to go somewhere else? This can happen around commitment. Let's say commitment in a relationship. Some people, it's like they're in a relationship. There's no real problem, but I don't know, something's not quite right. It starts to feel, like I said, like gritty, uncomfortable, kind of like wearing a scratchy sweater. Like you can wear it and it's okay, but like, I don't know. Okay, so pause. Why? Why exactly is this relationship really a problem? What's really going on here? What's your process? Same thing can happen around sticking to like a health goal. I'm going to exercise regularly. And then suddenly it feels all wrong. This doesn't feel like a good idea. Why am I doing this? Oh, I think I got a little cold coming on. Like just this, like, it just starts feeling constricting and tight. And I don't know. And this isn't quite. And like this, and the thing is, what I see happen with people, what I have definitely seen happen with myself, was that in the rush to bolt from the situation or to create some new thing, you lose what you could gain from staying. It's a way that we try to outrun ourselves. So how can you stay with the process? Can you stay with the process even when it sucks? I'm not talking about situations where like someone's being harmed or something like that. Obviously, if you are being hit, if you are suicidal, if you are, like, come on. Of course, I'm not talking about those situations. I'm talking about the times when you're walking into some kind of an arena where things aren't quite what you had hoped they would be. And the only solution is scrap that, start over. What is that about? Because that is what I did with self-help for years. That is what I did with God knows how many providers. And I feel incredibly lucky that for whatever reason, Matthew, it worked out because now I do use these tools on a regular basis. And I do see that if I had not used these tools, I would have been shortchanging myself and what was possible for my life. Do I have days where I am just like in meltdown mode and cry because I haven't attended to my feelings, discharge the emotional balloon, as Matthew would say? Yeah, absolutely. But I see that as a call to strive for excellence in my life and to hold myself more accountable. And I want to hold myself more accountable because it's just so clear now. I live such a better life when I use the tools. Shocker, right? It's like as if somebody told you, hey, like eating vegetables, if you eat more vegetables, you're going to feel better. And you're like, no. And then finally you start eating the vegetables and you're like, oh, look at that. I feel better. Or I need to get more sleep. I'll feel better. No. It's not sleep that I need. And finally you get sleep and it's like, oh, look at that. You feel better. Well, some of us need to stay with the process of our personal work. We need to, it's like whatever work you are engaged in right now, maybe it's a meditation practice, maybe it's shadow work, maybe it is Byron Katie and the inquiry process that she uses, maybe it's Buddhist meditation, maybe it's intensive therapy. I don't know. And I don't even think that Matthew's work has to be the work that works for everyone. My point is, are you staying with your process? Not just a finish line. Okay, check. I showed up for the appointment. I did it. Are you staying with the process? Are you all in even when it sucks? Or are you like, it sucks, I can't do it? Are you all in even when you're not sure? Or are you like, oh, I'd better not do, I'm just not quite sure? Are you all in even when you think that someone else is the one to blame? Or are you like, hey, they're to blame. I don't have any responsibility here. If they would do it better, I'd be okay. These are the questions I invite you to contemplate, because if you're willing to stay with your process and really see all the way through, there's so much to gain. There's so much richness to gain. These things are all pretty nuanced. I can't give you an exact metric for how you'll know if you're staying with the process versus if you're not. Perhaps the only metric that I really do know is you checking in with you. Let me tell the truth with myself right now. Am I really giving this my all? Have I shortchanged myself in any way? Have I tried to cut corners around this in any way? To me, how you answer that question is really the metric. Because like I knew in the work that Matthew was proposing that I hadn't really given it a shot. I knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew. And I think that with jobs or relationships or personal growth work that we're doing or commitments that we've made, whatever it is that arouses this for us where we don't want to stay with the process, I think deep down we know when we've been half-assing it. I mean, come on, let's, Iyanla Vanzant, my favorite. Let's call a thing, boo. Love it when she says that. Let's call a thing a thing. Have you actually really been in it to win it, all in, engaged, present, not disconnected, not hiding out? Like, have you fully shown up? And if you have fully shown up and fully given it your all, and you can look yourself in the mirror with clear eyes and go, you know what? I actually read that book and did all the exercises in that book and applied them to my life. I didn't just read the book and go, check. Fill out the worksheet, check. Showed up for the session, check. Attended the workshop, check. And then miraculously expected that my life was going to be better. I looked at my day-to-day. I looked at who I want to be. I looked at my integrity and I said, did I totally showed up, no half-assing it? No, I was all in, and I know that. Then I can walk away feeling clean. But if you can't really answer that question, if you can't really say that you gave it a fair shot, fair as in like in integrity, all in, no hiding out, no cutting corners, a fair shot to see if that would be helpful or effective, or if there's an insight to glean, something to learn, something more for you that you are not going to figure out after 6 months of trying it out. If you have really done that, then you know whether or not you've given it all that there was to give and learned everything that you came for. All right, that's today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You know you can continue the work and the fun if you want to. Head on over to yourcourageouslife.com/begin and become a Your Courageous Life subscriber, because as soon as you sign up, you get access to an entire library of worksheets and audios and other bonuses. And of course, you'll be receiving more courage in your inbox. And who wouldn't love that? You can learn more about the Courageous Living Coach certification at teamclcc.com. You can get the Courage Habit at your local bookseller, on Amazon, wherever you like. We can even connect on social media. I'm on Facebook at Your Courageous Life. So look for facebook.com/Your Courageous Life. And I'm on Instagram as Kate Courageous. And I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. So here's to you using these courageous tools in your life and creating a real ripple effect of good. And again, thanks so much for listening. I love it that you're here.